Welcome to the Astrology Star Sisters Talk Over Tea. Today we're going to talk about Neptune Retrograde, Revise, and Re-Envision. My guest today is Dabney Lawless. Welcome, Dabney. How are you today?
Hi, Elizabeth. Nice to see you.
Well, it's great to see you, and thanks for showing up today and talking about Neptune with me.
Yeah, this is a big one. This is a really, really cool thing to be doing a deep dive on because I think it's going to be affecting all of us so much over the summer and into next year.
Great. Okay, so let's get started. So, to get a hold of Dabney, her website is lawlessastrology.com. And my website is alightpath.com. If you want to get a hold of either of us, we'd love to hear from you. So Neptune Stations Retrograde in Pisces on July 2nd at 3:40 and 32 seconds a.m. in the Pacific Daylight Time. And here's a chart just for those that know a little bit about astrology that would like to see the chart. And for the Pacific time zone, Neptune will station retrograde in that 11th house of community. Would you like to add anything?
No, I mean, I think that it's interesting that Neptune is spending a long time at this last degree of Pisces. So it actually started in May. And, even now we're in 29 Neptune. So it won't be going retrograde. So it goes back over. But this final degree is kind of the hot point. And that's what we're going to be talking about today.
So some random facts about Neptune. Its home sign is Pisces. It naturally rules the 12th house. And Dabney told me it's on steroids. I love that saying.
It's pretty strong right now. It's been pretty strong for the past decade, for better or for worse.
And Neptune's a planet of dreams, inspiration, transcendence, merging, and compassion. And the caution is delusion, escape, foggy, confusion, and addiction. Would you like to add anything?
No, but I'm sure you've seen this with your readings that especially now with this final degrees of Neptune and Pisces, the fog has really settled. Like I've had so many people come to me with this sense of confusion and just sort of apprehension about the future in a way that I don't think I've ever seen before. And I really do think it has a lot to do with this final push of Neptune in Pisces.
That's a great way to look at it. It's like we're at that peak point, and it's like you want to say, is there light at the end of the tunnel? And I'm going to say, yes, there is, but we still have a little bit of time to get there.
Right. Yeah.
So the previous time that Neptune was in Pisces was from 1847 to 1862, and spiritualism gained momentum. The Mormons set up in Utah. The gold and silver rush was going on, and the end of the Mexican-American War. And there's more on here, but I just wanted to name a few. Oh, and another one that the steamboat service started from the East Coast to the West Coast. So that, has a Neptune flare.
Yeah, that's sort of one of the things for, people watching that don't specialize in astrology. Neptune's one of the outer planets and it has a very slow moving cycle. And so that's why the last time that Neptune was in the sign of Pisces was, well over 100 years ago. And, 1847 to 1862. So anytime Neptune goes into a new sign, it's going to bring with it all kinds of new archetypal inventions and energies and things that people are exploring. And so I think it's really like the one that stuck out the most to me, obviously, is that this was another time of like spiritualism gaining momentum. That's kind of interesting to me.
Okay, and Neptune entered Pisces on April 4th, 2011 through August 4th of 2011. So it was going, and then it must have retrograded, and then it went back into Pisces on February 3rd of 2012 until March 30th of 2025 of this year or next year. And then it will go back into Pisces a little bit in 2025 from October 22nd until January 26th of 2026.
Yeah. So really we've had the past decade, if you go back to 2021, 2012, that's when Neptune first entered Pisces, and that's when we really started seeing an increase in these Neptune and Pisces themes.
Yes. And let's see what else. I thought there was something else in here.
I think your next slide might have some of those themes.
Okay. So Neptune and Pisces, what was all that about? How are you start?
Yeah, so I mean, this is the thing that I think is really interesting. When you take Neptune, Neptune rules things like we've mentioned before, spirituality, but it also is delusion, and it is magic, and it's mysticism, but it's also illusions, and it is escape, and it is the fog settling in so you can't see things. And in the sign of Pisces, which it rules, it's been even stronger because Pisces is associated with all of those things too. So what we've seen is the future feels uncertain. There's been movements that have raised empathy. Things like the Black Lives Matters movement. I think that there's a high side for Pisces and Neptune, but then there's also a low side in Pisces and Neptune. So there's been an unbelievable amount of change. So we've had a pandemic, which I know affected all of us so much. There was the rise of fake news. So things that institutions and things that we trusted before really suddenly became things that were confusing, and we didn't know who to trust, where to look. So social media it took hold really during that time frame. Like social media, things like YouTube didn't exist before Pisces and Neptune and Pisces. And so there was the fentanyl crisis, and there are other forms of escapism. But on the high side, we saw astrology really go mainstream. I mean, I've been an astrologer for 20 years, and it wasn't really until social media and especially YouTube that people around the pandemic, that people just started really becoming interested in astrology to levels that I had never seen before. Before that, it was just like, what's your sun sign? Oh, I'd read the, sun sign horoscopes. But now, we have a whole language of mysticism and a language that kind of helps unveil people's unconsciousness, which kind of parallels that spiritual movement in the last cycle of Neptune and Pisces. But again, this has also been a rise in homelessness. It's been a rise in addiction. It's been a rise of people not being able to trust their things that they have known to be true. So it's kind of this balance. But I think that when you get to the final degrees like we're at, everything that we've been experiencing becomes that much more intense. Is there anything that you'd want to add about that?
Well, I agree with that. And we saw so much fake news because on the social media networks or channels or whatever you want to call them, they didn't have rules of what you could say or do. And so, it was a whole new ball game, so to speak, of trying to figure it out. So, but then it also was that we got the news firsthand, like when things were actually happening.
Right.
So, there was parts of
That's
it
the
that was
other thing with
good.
Neptune, right? There's no boundaries. That's a great point. Like Neptune and Pisces are known for not having good boundaries, right? And so we've seen over the past decade all of the social structures and boundaries that have been in place and that we've all kind of taken for granted have just dissipated. And I think that's caused a lot of confusion for people where they don't understand who they can trust anymore. I think that's caused a real crisis in trust for people. And I think when people, are afraid like that because they no longer know where to look or who to trust or what the boundaries are, like think of a little kid, without boundaries, they don't know how to grow. They don't know how to come into this world and be fully functioning adults. And I think we've seen a lot of people who have not been fully functioning adults because those boundaries have been stripped away. At the same time, I think there's been a tremendous rise in awareness around empathy. And, people like Brene Brown, the writer Brene Brown, like no one talked about empathy, and especially not empathy in the workplace. Are you kidding me? Like these are very Neptune and Pisces themes where it's like, oh, we actually have to understand another person's point of view. We have to show compassion. We have to show love. This is also when people became aware of narcissism. I think that, kind of bubbled up from the unconscious that, hey, we actually do care about people. I do love my neighbor. I do love my family. I do want to understand them. But the work has been kind of going on a very unconscious level over the past decade, and people have been acting out very unconsciously as a result, I think.
That's so true. And with the pandemic, we, basically were isolating ourselves. I mean, not that it was by choice, it was, kind of mandated upon us, but, not knowing what to do. And then that brought up mental health issues and other issues, even, like abuse of, a couple that lives together and one's abusive to another. And,
Right.
how do you deal with that? So it brought a lot of issues to the surface that were kind of, like you say, unconscious or just below the surface that weren't, they were buried in the fog, so to speak.
Yep. And I think that a lot of people are still sort of buried in that fog, but the issues have arisen, and they are kind of more on the surface, especially in these final degrees, and especially with the retrograde coming up, where I think then we can process and move forward in the next phase.
Yes, and that sounds good.
Doesn't it? Sounds like a relief.
So here's a little bit about Neptune in the mythology. Neptune is the Roman god of the sea. He originally was this god of fresh water, the sea, and horses, and he's brother to Pluto and Jupiter. The brothers preside over the realm of heaven, earth, and the underworld. Poseidon is named the Greek god of the sea. So, we have Roman mythology and Greek mythology. Neptune visits a sign for about 14 years, and it takes about 165 years to visit each sign of the zodiac.
Yeah,
So,
one thing I'll add really quickly about Neptune, that the god Neptune to me has always been really fascinating because he rules the sea, and the sea can be so inspiring and beautiful and gentle, and it can be so treacherous and terrifying and powerful. And so, Neptune has always been somewhat of an ambivalent god, right? Like, Jupiter is the great big, loving god, and Apollo and the sun, and Pluto is the evil one, and Kronos is kind of evil. But then Neptune, you're like, I don't know how to feel about Neptune, because Neptune really embodies both the good and the bad, and just the mystery of life, and like the ambiguity of both of these kind of powerful energies of the sea.
well, and all planets have a positive and a negative, or a polarity that, one is what we would call more positive and one is maybe a negative aspect of it, but it's all useful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I was glad that you brought that mythology in, because I'm always sort of like, ambiguous. Like he's not good or bad. He's just really freaking powerful. But like we don't always know what we're going to get during a Neptune transit.
So, it was interesting, looking up and doing research. It's like I wanted a famous person that was born when Neptune was in Pisces. Well, I just so happened to find Alan Leo, the father of modern astrology, they call him, who was born August 7th of 1860 in London, England, and he had Neptune at 29 degrees Pisces in retrograde. So, how fitting that I could fill this in with our talk when Pisces is at 29 degrees. He was an astrologer, an author, a publisher, collected astrological data, and was a theosophist. He has written many, many astrology books, and many of them are still available to this day. He was into esoteric astrology and horary and progressions, and he was a publisher too. So, anything you'd like to add?
Well, it's really interesting to me, and well, you've got a slide for this later, but just I want to bring up sort of that 29 degree is what they call the Anaretic degree. And like anytime a transit is in the final degree, it becomes that much more powerful. And so, what's interesting about this person having this 29 Pisces, this feels like a very magical degree to me because Neptune uh, rules Pisces, right? So, there is that kind of mutual reception that's like really strong. And then, Pisces in general, there's just so much magic. It's something that we can't see, it's something beyond us. And horary astrology, especially in esoteric, to me is very magical, right? It kind of defies logic, yet it works. And you have to go on faith, you have to go on trust. And it's sort of interesting that this person was born with that degree where like it was just like the magic was born in him, like the knowing. And we don't know why, like, but how did he know this? How did he know to bring astrology out in this way? So really fascinating.
Well, and he used his last name for his first name in Leo because he's a Leo sun that he kind of renamed himself.
Oh, so fun.
So here's his chart. I just wanted to show his chart for those that are interested. So he had that Neptune retrograde in his 8th house of transformation and letting go.
Yeah. And so an eighth house too, like channeling, there's a great placement where it's almost like he had a direct line to something that was channeling to him all of this information.
Yeah, the mystical arts, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then Nikola Tesla also has Neptune in Pisces, and his is retrograde, but it's at 21 degrees. And he was an inventor, electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, and a futurist. And, we still hear about him all the time because now we have the Tesla car. And, from his experiments and everything that they've used, the scientists are still using a lot of his information. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, brilliant. And the fact that it's in his 12th house too is really interesting because there's another marker of that kind of like something otherworldly being directed toward him, his genius coming from another world.
Yes, like the 8th and 12th house are like hidden houses.
Yeah.
And so it stands the test of time, so to speak.
Yep.
Okay, I have a quote here. The more conscious you become, the more aware you become of how unconscious you've been. And that's by Patricia Sun. So I
That's
thought that was good for Neptune and Pisces.
Yeah, and I think that's probably good for all of us, whether it's Neptune in Pisces, but I think it's probably, wise words for all of us.
Okay, now we have the Sabian symbol for 29 degrees, which you round up the Sabian symbol to the next degree. So we have Pisces 30. Would you like to read it?
Yeah, I actually have it here, but without my glasses, I have to read off a piece of paper. A majestic rock formation resembling a face is idealized by a boy who takes it as his ideal of greatness as he grows up and then begins to look like it. So I kind of pulled out some of the description from Dane Rudyard. It's very long, so I won't read it all, but this was kind of the nutshell that I thought was most compelling. This is the last stage of the last scene of the great ritual play of cyclic transformations. It brings us to the realization of the power of archetypes as factors conditioning life processes. Okay, that is a mouthful, and most people are probably like tuning out right now. But what that means to me is in the zodiac, you have 12 signs and you have 12 houses. And when you are looking at the 12th house, that's the last house, and you're looking at Pisces in the last sign, and Neptune, what you're looking at is like the full experience of life. So it's almost like the final piece of the puzzle is coming into place. But it's often at the end, when you are doing a puzzle, you've got like 5 pieces left, and like it seems like it'd be really easy to figure out which ones go where, but you're still turning them and twisting them to figure it out because it just hasn't come into place. And then all of a sudden the last 2 or 3 pieces, now it's obvious, and like you can move forward, and then you've completed the puzzle. Where we're kind of completing a puzzle that's been taking place over the past decade. And so what we have to do now is kind of have some patience, especially as Pisces is going to be retrograding over this 29, really powerful piece. It's about kind of internalizing and breathing into what has taken place over this past year, really reflecting on it and figuring out how things have gone wrong, where things have gone right, and how we want to move forward. But it will not be a conscious. That's the tough part about Neptune, especially Neptune and Pisces, is it isn't necessarily going to be conscious. But that doesn't mean we can't work with the energy. It means we have to have faith. We have to, be our own channels. You can pick a tarot card. You can take a bath and light some candles and put some really transformative music on and really reflect, because I think that's what this is asking us to do, is be reflective, so we can see what went wrong, where we got off track personally and societally, so then we can hopefully get back on track at the point at which Neptune goes into Aries, and that is a completely different energy where, we're all taken off a little bit like a rocket.
That's awesome. And I wanted to mention that the Sabian symbols were channeled by Elsie Wheeler, a spiritual medium, and with the help of Mark Edmund Jones, an astrologer, and he wrote about them. And then Dwayne Rujar,
Dane Rudyard?
Dane Ruger, sorry. Thanks for the help.
Sorry.
He took off from what Mark Edmund Jones has done, and more people. There's several people that have done some modern versions of the Sabian symbols, like Linda Hill in Australia and Blaine Bovey, and there's a few others. So they're very interesting, to those archetypal symbols, to line them up with astrology, because it's like so amazing how true they can be, or how much they give another information about that.
Yeah, I think that some people really work nicely with metaphors. And if you kind of, paint a picture of this, you realize that this boy, becomes the thing that he always wanted to, that he loved and was beautiful to him, right? And so the metaphor there is like, we all have within us this beauty that can come out, but we have to, grow into it. And so I think we're kind of growing into it. This is the final phase before we start a whole new transformational phase from ground zero.
Well, it's like having a dream and then visualize that dream into manifestation is, what it's speaking to me about. So it does happen. So it's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, Elizabeth, and I don't know too much about your story. And maybe I need to listen to some more of your radio show to hear that. But I do know that in my own life, I did have a vision as a child, and that's come into fruition. And then, like anybody, you realize your dream, or you realize, and there's a new one that needs to be born. And then things start to fall away. And I think we're in the falling away phase to some degree. Like, things that no longer serve us are going to be falling away. We're going to be releasing things that no longer are beneficial to us. I think there's potentially a void. I mean, that's one of the things that I think a lot of my clients are feeling, is this void. And so that 29 is a culmination in a time where we can kind of sit in the fear and the confusion and acknowledge it, and say there is a paradox, say that there are things that we do not understand that are happening, but then trust that there's something bigger that will come along, and, we will then have the energy to build again.
Well, and start working now on what you want to, your new dreams. It's like to re-envision. It's like, okay, now you have time to finish up, until 2025, or even 2026 for that matter. And, what's your new dream? So it's like you have time to prepare for those steps. So I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, I know one of our teachers, Rachel Lang, she wrote a book about magic called Modern Day Magic. And that seems like a perfect book for this time. It's kind of like there's magic in all of our lives, right? And so we can live unconsciously, or we can co-create with the cosmos and bring some magic into the world.
Yes, that revise and re-envision. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're finally to the 29th arcanic degree. So like you've said before, it's a falling away and it's a culminating time. and to integrate all the things. And it's, can be a little chaotic because it's like if you were packing up to go on vacation. I know people that, pack their bag at the last possible moment and leave 10 minutes after they should have left, or even 30 minutes after they should have left to be on the way to the airport. So to me, that's a similar energy to the 29th degree. What would you
Yeah.
like to say?
Yeah, no, I remember I did send this to you for the slideshow presentation. Was that I read the New York Times said fentanyl has peaked mysteriously. And for astrologers, it doesn't feel like a mystery. It's like we've been in this kind of phase where people have chosen to tap out. People, people watching this maybe have loved ones that they've lost to drug addiction or even alcoholism. And I think a lot of times when things get really painful, with the sensitivity of Pisces and Neptune in Pisces can be incredibly painful. And so a lot of times people need to tap out and say that this life is just a little too hard for them. And so, now that we're kind of wrapping up that energy, it's interesting to see them sort of say, mysteriously, fentanyl is falling. We don't know why, maybe it has something to do with the fact that people are realizing we need to not tap out right now. Now we need to just heal.
Well, my newspaper says different in the Seattle area. It says that, that fentanyl is on the rise, so or it's still
Wow.
rising. So it'll be interesting because maybe it is in that transitory phase of
Right.
shifting, which would be great.
Yeah, yes, I think that we would all definitely welcome some healing energy versus escapist energy for our loved ones.
Okay, and then here's some more on the 29th degree. I don't know if we need to read any of these or not, but I like the tides go in and out. What is leaving will be back transformed. And Dabney wrote that, and I thought that was just so well written.
Oh,
I like
thank
that.
you. Yeah, and also exactly there is this void and it's uncomfortable, but it's like a balsamic moon phase, which is also an ending phase. No one likes endings. No one likes goodbyes. And I think this is a goodbye to a lot of things, but unconsciously. So it's kind of this strange energy where we don't totally know yet what we're saying goodbye to, but we've got a sadness and a feeling that what we once knew is no longer there, but what is coming is not yet born. And when we were talking before, you were sort of saying it's in the birth canal, the baby hasn't come yet, it's this liminal in between time.
Well, and it's really important that, it is necessary at times to release things and let go so that there's space for new things to come in, new opportunities, new doors to open.
Right. And it's not surprising too that the pandemic largely or disproportionately impacted elderly people, because again, it was a closing cycle. And Neptune does have to do with that sort of the veil between life and death. And so being in that closing cycle, elderly people were more ready to say goodbye.
Well, and like you say, it's it's in the 12th sign of the zodiac, so it's almost at the end to start a whole new cycle back at Aries.
Right.
And that's where we're at. What's next? Neptune and Aries.
Yeah. So some of the things that just were coming to me was the escapism and the confusion begin to clear, action instead of floating in a sea of uncertainty. The overwhelming floods that we've been experiencing maybe are going to become hurricanes. So Neptune and Aries, like you said, that's its own presentation. But kind of if there's been this sort of the floods are rising feeling, now there's kind of once it goes into Aries in 25, 26, there's much more of a jarring feeling of like a hurricane where you're being blown this way and that, and you've got to really brace yourself to stay present during a hurricane. I think there's going to be action around the homelessness crisis. I think there's going to be action around how to deal with addiction. And I think there's going to be action around people who can't fend for themselves. I think that we've seen a lot of dismantling of our social safety net during this the past probably 30 or 40 years. And I think there's going to come, the crisis point is now where we recognize we have to figure out a way to help support people in need. And especially, AI and things like that may be the thing that tips the scale, or climate change. There are things coming that may be very action oriented, that feel very jarring, but then will then ultimately be that cardinal Aries where things actually can get done versus just feeling helpless. I think there's been a lot of helpless feeling, especially like I live in the Bay Area, and everyone feels very helpless around the homelessness epidemic because there's not an easy fix. And somehow, even though people have a lot of empathy and they feel horrible about it, they don't know what to do. They feel helpless. And I think when Neptune enters Aries, I'm hopeful that that's going to be more action oriented, where it's like we finally get to the bottom of solving some of these crises.
Yes, that's a good hope to hold, I think. I'll hold that with you.
Okay.
So Neptune ingresses into Aries March 30th, 2025, so it's not too far down the road. And we'll be there until it enters Taurus in March of 2039. And this is a little picture of Mars. So, kind of the red, hot, dry planet. So I thought that was kind of appropriate to throw that picture in. And that's a picture from NASA that they had. And then I don't know if we want to say anything about, the planets going into sign, or, for each sign, what that means. I never really worked on that, and I forgot
No,
all about it.
I can sort of pull this out, is if that's, and you can sort of riff with me. So for
Okay.
Pisces, with this, as you're experiencing this, you're experiencing it even more so in the 29th degree because it's in your first house of self. So I imagine the past decade for, Pisces, there has been a lot of transformation that has gone on unconsciously. And this is a time where you can kind of process that information. Again, it may not be super conscious, but just be as aware as possible that change has been happening to you, and you're going to be kind of coming out in a renewed sense of who you are. With Aries having it in the 12th house, you guys have not known what's been going on either, but hopefully you've had a much more you've had a spiritual awakening, is what I would say. To some degree, like Aries isn't known for being particularly in touch with their spiritual side. And so this has been a time where, you can kind of, connect with your guides, connect with things that feel bigger than yourself. There's kind of a quiet, creative energy that's been taking place, and that's what's been transforming within you. And for Taurus, it's been in your 11th house, which would tell me that you have been connecting with people and communities of a more spiritual nature. And this is where you can lean on your community to kind of figure out what's next for you, because you've had the benefit of meeting new people that maybe study astrology, or maybe they are politically aligned with you, and you've, joined a letter writing campaign. Whatever that community has been for you, there's been an opportunity for you, a personal inner transformation that has grown your faith in the world through other people. Gemini, it's been in your 10th house. So you've had a renewed sense of faith around career and your place in the world. That has been the theme for you with Neptune going through your 10th house. And so really kind of reflecting about what the past 10 years have been like for you out in the world. Who have you become? How have you changed? How has your faith in yourself or your faith in the world grown? In the 9th house, intuition, spiritual beliefs, unpacking the myths that no longer serve you. This is about travel. So anytime you've encountered another culture, or you've faced legal problems, or you've invested in yourself and gone to school, or you've invested in learning astrology, like whatever that investment you made in yourself to get out of the small world that maybe you initially came from, that has increased your sense of spiritual beliefs and your faith in yourself. Leo in the 8th house, deep connection with another, intimacy. This is where sex can be very transformative for you. So go out there and really have some fun with your partner and make sure that you are connecting on a deep level. Leo, also, you could have experienced some death, or so 8th house rules anything that is a little bit like things we don't like to talk about at the dinner table. It's sex, death, and taxes, right? And so Leos have been learning about how to tap into their unconscious around things that are really meaningful and powerful. And so that could be the illness of a loved one. It could be, you've really had to find your inner strength and your inner faith and your spiritual beliefs around tougher subjects, but also around intimacy. 7th house is relationships. With Neptune in the 7th house, you may have experienced a breakup or a divorce, but you also may have experienced a deepening of your relationships where you can find and learn more about yourself through the other person. Libra in the 6th house, we're talking about your day-to-day work and habits. And so it's almost like a meditation to take care of yourself and self-care. I think that's the most important thing that I would say about that is, understanding that it's not monotony, that you can bring beauty and magic to the everyday activities like, feeding your kids or brushing your teeth. Scorpio in the 5th house, this is creativity and learning to love and to put yourself out there in a way that you are attracting love and appreciation. So I think anything that you can do on a creative basis right now is going to help restore that inner sense of faith and spiritual belief, not only in yourself, but in the people that you encounter that you have karma with. Sagittarius in the 4th house, this is about your family. So the past decade has been quite a journey for you around family and uncovering unconscious patterns within your family, making things somewhat conscious, things that maybe that you guys haven't discussed. This is the opportunity to kind of close that out and to show some loving energy and faith with the people that you created a home with or the family that you come from. Capricorn in the 3rd house tells me that this has to do with your communication style. So you found that you have a new way to be empathetic and communicate. Capricorns aren't necessarily known for being super empathetic in their communication style. They can be a little harsh. And so this has been a transformative time for you to learn how to be a little bit more empathetic in your communication, how to channel spiritual energy into things like books or any sort of creative project. Also listening. Neptune, Pisces, that's listening energy. So Capricorns have learned how to maybe take a little bit of a backseat and listen a little bit more. And in Aquarius, you've had a opportunity to transform your finances. Now, this may have actually been pretty stressful for you. Pisces going through the 2nd house can be a little bit hard to hold on to. So maybe finances have kind of been something that have been a little slippery for you. And so just know that moving into when it's in Aries, when it's in the 3rd house, it's going to transform and money won't be as stressful for you. So what do you think? Do you have anything that you'd want to add, Elizabeth? I know I went through all that pretty quickly.
Well, I think you did a great job. And so, how you did it is like you put that sun sign in the 1st house and what house it would be in, but you could also use it for your moon and your sun sign and your rising sign also. So I just wanted to say that. But I think what you said was great. I agree with all that.
Yeah. And
So
also I think like if you know what your rising sign is, you can always, if you don't know, you can go to astro.com or you can get a reading. But I think the rising sign is even more pertinent than your sun sign personally.
So any last thoughts that you want to leave people with?
No, I think just that this is a really good time to meditate, to breathe, kind of go back. I know I sort of went through those quickly, but maybe, think of the themes that are pertinent in your life where you've needed to grow and have reflection and change, and how you've changed over the past decade. Look at what happened in 2011 to 2012 versus now, and how far you've come and who you are as a person now versus then. And I think that'll give you a lot of clues as to what this Neptune in Pisces has done in your personal life, and, help you to kind of reflect, show gratitude, paint a beautiful watercolor picture to, mark the occasion, and get ready for some new energy in a year.
Well, thank you. And thank you for joining me today. And we have a few more slides to finish up with.
All right.
I want to thank our audience that's watching live, and then all those that watch later. So come back for more episodes of the Astrology Star Sisters Talk Over Tea. I've been doing 3 episodes a month, and we'll see if that grows. Here's a list of the upcoming episodes, astrology forecast for each month, a full moon forecast for each month, a new show, Chiron Asteroid Series. And then once a month, I'm on Talk Cosmos, the Archetypal Symbols team. And that aired earlier today. And then the Astrology Star Sisters Talk Over Tea, we have the Venus Star Point in Gemini, Saturn Retrograde Reality Check, and Summer Solstice coming up. And then here's Dabney's YouTube channel, how to watch her YouTube channel. And then, of course, how to get a hold of Dabney if you'd like to get a hold of her at lawlessastrology.com, and my website's alightpath.com. And thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it, and hopefully you'll come back one day soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please consider subscribing to my channel, leaving a like, and thank you for your support. It's greatly appreciated. Until next time, bye.